The lines again at lines 35 through 42, and especially the German lines, waste and empty is the sea. Again, back to this notion of lost love and the idea that water is going to be important. By the way, we should point out, there's an apostrophe here in these lines of 35 through 42 where she's talking to another person as if we expect that other person and we understand that other person to be there. In lines 43 we meet Madame Sostres. She was actually also a person that Eliot knew of, with a wicked pack of tarot cards, right? The quest again to see, to know the future. Those are pearls that were his eyes, is from Shakespeare's Tempests. And we're going to have, of course, in section 4, death by water. In other words, this is the first introduction to Phlebas, the Phoenician, who is going to drown later in the poem. Let's point out, we got a lot of Dante references here. Line 56, those crowds of people walking round in a ring, as well as the whole notion of the sighing that goes on. For those of you that have studied your Dante's Inferno, you know that one of the rings of Dante's Inferno is in fact people who all they do for eternity is walk around and they sigh. Of course, that term is going to be rendered in Holloman as the word alas, as we talk about it in that other lecture. They sigh. Why? Because they never could make up their mind what they were going to do. They're much like, of course, Hamlet in that famous to be or not to be speech. Thus conscience makes cowards of us all. Remember those lines, right? Those are pearls that were his eyes, as well as kind of a frightening idea of being at the bottom of the ocean and the eyes have turned into kind of like pearls or stone, right? I had not thought death had undone so many as a direct line from Dante. It's one of the first things Dante the Pilgrim says when he ends up in hell. I mean, if everybody who's ever lived goes to hell, who deserves to go to hell for Dante, that's a lot of people. And when he shows up there, he's like, whoa, there's a lot of people here. I had not thought that death had done so many is the line. And it works here. Notice again, the zombie image of people just kind of walking across the bridge and they don't have any reason to be excited about anything. Okay? I've often said it. I said it in my home in lecture as well. When the bell rings and you go out into the halls of Orland High School, just look at the students walking from one holding pen to the next holding pen and watch their body language. And they look a lot like zombies. And you'll play the game here as well, right? By line 69, you've got Stetson, who has apparently been in the war, and you've got some speaker talking to him. And he asks some interesting questions about the corpse that you planted in the garden. So we've got all kinds of growth themes types of things happening here. Oh, keep the dog far hence that's friend to men, or with his nails he'll dig it up again. And then that you hypocrite lecteur, mon semblable, mon frère, to take us back to the Baudelaire, to a reader. In other words, the first section will end with an indictment that goes directly to the reader. You don't get to stand outside this poem and say, yeah, you're right. Lots of people are really jacked up and don't have a legitimate life. No. This is a poem that says, we're all in this one together because we're all moderns. Of course, today we read the poem as postmoderns or maybe even post-postmoderns. At 2a, of course, let's say it. We're all in this together. That's obviously one of the major messages here. We're all going down together. Notice the notion of going down, right? At 2b, let's pay attention to the opening lines really quickly. And enjambment, that's what we call this thing of running on. Just read it with me. Enjambment means that you keep reading the line. Read the opening lines with me. April is the cruelest month. That's a thought. Breeding lilacs out of the dead land. That's a thought. Mixing memory and desire. That's a thought. Stirring dull roots with spring rain. That's a thought. So why break the line at the word breeding, mixing, stirring? Do you got me? By the way, if you know your iambic pentameter, you also will pay attention that you've got it. April is the cruelest month. That's 4. Right? I am breeding. That gets you your 5th. So in other words, let's put it in our notes. We have iambic pentameter. I mean, look at the next line. Lilacs out of the dead land. That's 4. Iambic ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. But then mixing. What's going on here? Well, scholars have pointed out right from the beginning, Eliot wanted to make a point. The ancient way of, again, Milton, Paradise Lost, of working, like Shakespeare, with iambic pentameter kind of puts you in a place of, if you know your poetics, this is a place I know. But Eliot is going to break the rhythms with this enjambment game of breeding, and then he hits the line. And then he goes to the next line. Lilacs out of the dead land. Mixing, and then he hits the line again. That's what we call enjambment. In other words, if you read the line as this way, and some early readers of poetry, as we've talked about in other lectures, they will sometimes read the line instead of the thought. So they will go, April is the cruelest month, breeding. Lilacs out of the dead land, mixing. Memory and desire stirring. And then they go, this doesn't make any sense. Well, no, because if you understand enjambment, you will keep reading. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land. For a note to yourself, when you read any poetry, you have to pay attention, of course, to your punctuation. Yeah? The old forms are getting jacked is another way to say this. At 3A, well, we got so many allusions going in here, so many languages. Of course, Dante is so important. You can see my Holloman lecture for more of that. At 3B, here's a question for you. Are you made sad that things change? Or are you excited? Right? How about this one for a question? Do you want to know the future? Okay, I'll play this game with you. I love to play this game with students in 303, right? Imagine if in our building there's a room with only a computer on a table and a chair. On the computer screen is a line. You can click anywhere on that bar and you will see live video of your life. Let's just begin with your birth and not your conception so we don't traumatize you. So if you click at the very beginning of that bar, you will see the moment of your birth. Anything in between, you're going to see the video of exactly what was happening in your life. At the end of the bar is the last breath you take. Question. A, would you want to go in that room, sit down at the computer, and click on that bar, and see your life? B, where would you go on that bar? Would you go to the beginning? Would you go back to a moment in your past that you could watch one more time? How many of you would go to the very end of the bar so that you could click on it to know? Right? How much time do I have left? That is to say, what will the end look like? The future. Do you want to know the future? Is it a good idea to want to know the future? This poem, of course, will ask those questions. All right, let's quickly go now to section 2, Game of Chess. By the way, the title of this one comes from a Thomas Milton play, and the title of that play, he wrote too, A Game of Chess, but he also wrote Women Beware Women, and here, this one's important. You got to kind of know this as an allusion to appreciate what happens in section 2. In the play, you got a young girl who is sitting in a room. She's being seduced by a man. Her mother-in-law should be watching her, but her mother-in-law is busy playing a game of chess in the adjacent room. So in other words, she's not paying attention while a young girl is going to be seduced. All right, here we go. Section 2. Again, I challenge you, conquer monkey mind, and just read along. Just experience the text. All right, follow along. Here we go.
The chair she sat in, like a burnished throne, glowed on the marble, where the glass, held up by standards wrought with fruited vines, from which a golden Cupidon peeped out, another hid his eyes behind his wing. Double the flames of 7-branched candelabra, reflecting light upon the table as the glitter of her jewels rose to meet it, from satin cases poured in rich profusion. In vials of ivory and colored glass unstoppered, lurked her strange synthetic perfumes, unguent, powdered or liquid, troubled, confused, and drowned the sense in odors. Stirred by the air that freshened from the window, these ascended in fattening the prolonged candle flames, flung their smoke into the laquiarea, stirring the pattern on the coffered ceiling. Huge seawood fed with copper, burned green and orange, framed by the colored stone, in which sad light a carved dolphin swam. Above the antique mantel was displayed, as though a window gave upon the sylvan scene, the change of Philomel by the barbarous king so rudely forced. Yet there the nightingale filled all the desert with inviolable voice, and still she cried, and still the world pursues, jug jug to dirty ears. and other withered stumps of time were told upon the walls. Staring forms leaned out, leaning, hushing the room enclosed. Footsteps shuffled on the stair. Under the firelight, under the brush, her hair spread out in fiery points, glowed into words, then would be savagely still. My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you're thinking. Think. I think we're in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bones. What is that noise? The wind under the door. What is that noise now? What is the wind doing? Nothing again, nothing. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember nothing? I remember those are pearls that wear his eyes. Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head? That Shakespearean rag. It's so elegant, so intelligent. What shall I do now? What shall I do? I shall rush out as I am and walk the street with my hair down, so. What shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do? The hot water at 10, and if it rains, a closed card at 4, and we shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes and waiting for a knock upon the door. When Lil's husband got demobbed, I said, I didn't mince my words. I said to her myself, hurry up, please, it's time. Now Albert's coming back. Make yourself a bit smart. He'll want to know what you've done with that money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. He did, I was there. You have them all out, Lil, and get a nice set, he said. I swear I can't bear to look at you, and no more can't I said, and think of poor Albert. He's been in the army 4 years, he wants a good time, and if you don't give it him, there's others will, I said. Oh, is there, she said. Something of that, I said. Then I'll know who to thank, she said, and give me a straight look. Hurry up, please, it's time. If you don't like it, you can get on with it, I said. Others can pick and choose if you can't. But if Albert makes off, it won't be for lack of telling. You ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique. And her only 31. I can't help it, she said, pulling a long face. It's them pills I took to bring it off, she said. She's had 5 already, nearly died of young George. The chemist said it would be all right, but I've never been the same. You are a proper fool, I said. Well, if Albert won't leave you alone, then it is, I said. What you get married for if you don't want children? Hurry up, please, it's time. Well, that Sunday, Albert was home, and they had a hot gammon, and they asked me in to dinner to get the beauty of it hot. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. Good night, Bill. Good night, Lou. Good night, May. Good night. Ta-ta. Good night. Good night. Good night, ladies. Good night, sweet ladies. Good night. Good night.
All right, let's pause now and go back and take a look at the opening lines here of Section 2, A Game of Chess. First of all, the description of a beautiful, luxurious room. So put that in your notes right away. Luxurious room with all these drawings all over the place. But one of the drawings is the drawings of the famous story of Philomel, who's this beautiful girl who is raped by this king, and then to try and keep her from telling anybody, he cuts out her tongue, and then she's turned into a nightingale. So right away, let's put it in our notes. This will be T.S. Eliot's attempt to try to resurrect the theme of sex and violence. We're going to see more of this as we go. Notice in line 89, the use of the word drowned the sense in odors, right? Notice trouble, confused, and drowned the sense in odor. It's significant that Eliot wants us to continue to remember this word. Of course, the line 103, the withered stumps of time. I like that term. I would circle that one, the withered stumps of time. In other words, this is what history often is the study of the withered stumps of time. It does beg the question if T.S. Eliot's poem, The Wasteland, has become just another withered stump of time, right? By the way, that line about leaning out, the leaning at line 105 makes us think about the Prufrock line, right? Old men leaning out of windows in shirt sleeves, okay? The conversation, now, at line 111, right? My nerves, she says, are bad tonight. Yes, bad. And then she says, stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you are thinking. Think. I've had students that say, wow, this is the first time in the poem that I feel totally at home, because it sounds like a conversation I've either had with my mom, dad, or it's a conversation I've had with somebody who's attracted to me or whatever, a pal of mine, and I just don't want to talk. Of course, let's remind ourselves, it's Prufrock who says it, right? In the love song of Geoffrey Prufrock, it's impossible to say just what I mean. So this inability to communicate, right? She says, what are you doing? Why don't you think these questions are coming like a barrage, right? Notice his response is, I think we're in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bones. Now this notion of rats, I would circle it. We're going to come back to it along with bats by the very end of the poem, right? And then the noise. What is the noise, right? The wind under the door. What is the noise now? What is the noise doing? And again, notice the use of the word nothing. Again, nothing. And then again, she comes back. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? We're back to these questions. Do you remember nothing? And again, I'll say it. I remember those are pearls that were his eyes. And then I've had some students that circle the next line as the significant line. Again, I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite line from this poem? Some students have said the next line is that line for them. Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head? And then the Shakespearean rag line. Of course, this one is a challenging line, right? Again, this notion of ennui, the boredom, nothing left to do. We're back to Baudelaire again in his To the Reader lines that we read. At lines 139, we got an interesting barroom scene. Let's talk about that one for just a few minutes. There's some students who are really confused by this until they get a couple of pieces of information and then it makes total sense to them. You can go back and read these lines and it'll make total sense to you once you have a couple of pieces of information. One, we're just looking in on a barroom scene where you've got a woman who is talking in a bar, but she keeps being interrupted by the barman, the tender of the bar, who keeps saying, hurry up please, it's time. Hurry up please, it's time. In other words, he wants to shut up the bar. It's time for them all to leave. By the way, do make a note at level 2B. Did you notice the spelling of the word it's? There's no apostrophe. Now this is a genius poet who edits this poem heavily. Do you think he forgot the apostrophe? Hurry up please, it is time. Or hurry up please, it's time. I'll just leave that one to you to kind of start to think about what is going on there. Now, what is it that we're talking about? Well, we've got an exchange going on. You got a soldier coming back from the war, Albert, and the woman is telling the other woman, you need to fix yourself up. Look at you. Your teeth, disgusting. What is going on with you? She has to admit that her problem is that she's had children, and her last child, she aborted the child by taking a pill that was given by a chemist, and it jacked her all up. So again, you've got these notions of suicide and or of infanticide and death happening as well in this poem. And then again with this hurry up please, it's time thing going on. Notice all the repetitions as well at 2B. Notice I said. I mean, you can just go through this and circle it later for yourself. How many times I said, I said, I said. The hurry up please, of course, repetitions as well. And then finally, the last lines, good night, ladies. Good night, sweet ladies, good night. For those of us who have studied Hamlet, we know those are the words that were spoken by Ophelia, who, remember, she has flowers in her hand as she is leaving to go out to do what? Commit suicide. Why does Ophelia commit suicide? Remember, the play Hamlet is a play about self-slaughter. You can go back and look at our lectures on learnstrong.net about this, right? A play about self-slaughter. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms, weapon, against the sea of troubles and by opposing in them. In other words, Hamlet is musing on suicide in the Act 3 speech. And of course, the irony of that play, Hamlet, is that the only suicide that actually takes place is the suicide of Hamlet's lover, Ophelia. There is a reading of that play, as we've said in that lecture on Hamlet, that in fact Ophelia kills herself because she knows she's pregnant with Hamlet's child, which would play right into this whole abortive thing as well. The jilted lover, obviously, storyline is here as well. And the notion, again, let's put it in our notes, that sex is something that's done, but not something that's enjoyed. We're going to get to this, and we said this in our conversation about hollow men. It was T.S. Eliot who pointed out, along with a lot of other thinkers, that after the First World War, when sexual prohibitions began to decrease, that the 20th century would see more sex in the history of the world, but less enjoyment. Everybody's hooking up, but nobody seems to enjoy it very much anymore. In other words, more sex, less love. Certainly T.S. Eliot was on to something in that regards. All right, let's jump to 2a really quickly. Notice in this, it's a brilliantly constructed section. We go from Philomel, who was the girl who was raped, had her tongue cut out, and then turned into a nightingale, right? To the nervous woman, to finally, of course, the lady in the bar. Notice the number of female voices that are a part of this poem, and that takes us back to the Sibyl at the beginning of the poem, right? Finally, at 2b, notice, again, all of the references, the refrains here, right? Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. It almost leads to kind of like a hurried feeling when we're reading it. And, of course, a feeling as well of kind of desperation. I've got to get everything said before they finally kick us out of the bar or whatever. At 3a, well, obviously we've got the Greek myths here going down, right, with the Philomel thing. We've got sex and violence happening together. You can take a look at my lectures on Hamilton's mythology if you want to hear more about that notion of why is it the case that in Greek mythology we got so much of sexual violence happening, perpetrated by, usually it of course is males towards females. It's not always that way, but almost always that way. At 3b,